African Americans are serving bravely and with distinction in every theater of World War II, while simultaneously struggling for their own civil rights from the world's greatest democracy. World War II has laid the foundation for post-war integration of the military. In 1914, fewer than 4,000 Americans were serving in the military, and only 12 African Americans had become officers. Now, in 1945, more than 1.2 African Americans are serving in uniform on the home front in Europe and the Pacific, including thousands of African American women in the Women's Auxiliary. During these years, the segregation practices of our civilian life spilled over into the military. This draft was segregated, and more often than not, African Americans are passed over by the all-white draft boards. Pressure from the NAACP is leading President Roosevelt to pledge that African Americans will be enlisted according to their percentages in the population. This percentage hasn't been attained yet, but we see African American numbers growing dramatically in the Army, Navy, Army Air Force, Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard. While most African Americans serving at the beginning of World War II are assigned to non-combat units and relegated to service duty, such as supply, maintenance, and transportation, their work behind front lines is equally vital to the war effort. Many drive for the famous Red Ball Express, which carries 500,000 tons of supplies to the advancing 1st and 3rd Armies through France.
Now, 1945, troop losses virtually forced the military to begin placing more African American troops into positions as infantrymen, pilots, tankers, medics, and officers in increasing numbers. Still, African American MPs stationed in the South often could not enter restaurants where their German prisoners were being served a meal. On D-Day, the 1st Army on Omaha and Utah beaches includes about 1,700 African American troops. This number includes a section of the 327th Quartermaster Service Company and the 320th Anti-Aircraft Barrage Balloon Battalion, which protect troops on the beach from aerial attack. The all-black 761st Tank Battalion is fighting its way through France with Patton's 3rd Army. They're spending 183 days in combat and are credited with capturing 30 major towns in France, Belgium, and Germany. The Army Air Force also has established several African American fighter and bomber groups. The famous Tuskegee Airmen of the 332nd Fighter Group have become part of the 15th Air Force, flying ground support missions over Anzio and escorting bombers on missions over southern Italy. The Tuskegee Airmen have flown more than 15,000 sorties May 1943 and June 1945. Bomber crews often request to be escorted by these red tails, a nickname acquired from the painted tails of the Tuskegee fighter planes. 66 Tuskegee Airmen died in combat. During the global conflict, African American leaders and organizations are establishing the WW campaign, calling for victory against the enemy overseas and victory against racism at home.